Hello, my name is Brita Wallace, family and parent educator with Wallace Family Ministry. Welcome to my channel. We are on day 7 of our Love Dare for Parents out of the Love Dare books for parents. And we are going to just hop right into day 7, which is love is not irritable. So we always start with a verse. So our verse today is put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another. Colossians 3:12-13, and I always write the verse up on our notes as a key point for you to refer back to, because that really is the verse, the theme for the day, right? So, love is a calming breeze, not a storm waiting to happen. Your first response to problems either leaves your kids with refreshing and positive character lessons or with painful memories of how not to behave under pressure, okay? So that's one of our points, is love is a calming breeze, not a storm waiting to happen. And then our first response to problems leaves our kids with positive character lessons or with painful memories of how not to behave under pressure. Okay, so sadly, some parents never pass up an opportunity to get upset with our children, right? They feel obligated to take full advantage of anything that goes wrong by expressing how deeply frustrated they are with the situation. But let's be honest, no one likes to cuddle a porcupine or lie down in a briar patch. And these shouldn't be the only options we give our children inside their own home. If we immediately voice irritation rather than tempering emotion, we not only make ourselves taste the bitterness in our hearts, but force feed it to everyone else around us as well. This is a difficult day this can be a difficult day for some, because a lot of times, and I can relate, there was many of my years of my life where I did find myself getting irritable, just with every little thing, and I just kind of did life that way all the time, and it's something that I've had to be intentional about really changing in my life, and that happens less and less as I practice more and more patience, which is not a strong suit of mine, but patience, as we have already learned through our studies, is, I like to refer to it as a muscle. It needs to be practiced. It needs to be worked on in order to grow. We're not born with patience. It's not something that comes naturally to us, especially in the culture and society that we live in today. This is a now world. Everybody wants everything now. Everybody wants everything immediately. There's no waiting for somebody to respond. We're just acting. An example of that is when we ask our children to do something. If they don't get up or come over or whatever it is, immediately in that 1 second, we're flipping off the handle sometimes. Then they're getting in trouble and they're like, oh my goodness, like I just wanted to finish this one thing, right? That they were trying to do. And they're not comfortable saying that to us because of how we react often to them, right? So giving them time and being patient with them, and I'm not saying, oh, give them 10 minutes, but if you set this stage for connection and openness with your kids will feel comfortable saying, hey, I need a few minutes to just finish up this thing that I'm doing, and then I'll come over, or we can say, hey, finish this up, and then I want you to be doing this, please, or whatever. And we can still be kind, we can still be patient. Not everything needs an immediate response, and most things do not. Some do. Some things do need an immediate response. Dangerous situations, they need an immediate response. Sometimes we need to yell in those situations. Sometimes we have to get physical if we have to push somebody back, if they're about to get hit by a car, something like that. Those are extreme situations, though. If we can practice patience, we can become less irritable. That's just one way. So love is hard to offend and quick to forgive. It doesn't act like a martyr over minor mishaps. So that's one of our other points today is love is hard to offend and easy to forgive, okay? So, and then I have, with it, that it asks to extend a loving response and not a touchy reaction, okay? So, and it calls us to quickly diffuse any explosion that irritability wants to set off. So if that means we have to walk away in the moment, that doesn't mean walk away and not come back and talk to our kids. We're missing when we're just walking away and we're not talking to our kids about what happened, and what the expectation is, and being able to talk through that. We're missing a teachable moment for our children to learn from us. So sometimes we need to walk away, though, if we feel anger and irritability and stuff building up inside of us, okay? So it's not the easiest thing to do. I'm not saying that any of this is easy, but it's the appropriate response. It's how we grow in relation with our children. It's one of the ways that we connect with them. If we're just yelling at them all the time, getting irritated with them all the time, and frustrated with them all the time, and we're displaying that to them, then they're not going to respond well to us. They're just not. That's not how we are created as humans. We respond oftentimes, especially when we feel attacked, by fight or flight. We get defensive, we argue back. There's a number of things, we start yelling, we get upset, we get frustrated, we start voicing that. When we're doing that, we're teaching our children to do that, and then they're responding that way to us, when really it's a reflection of our behavior with them. In a lot of cases, and in most cases, our brains develop based upon the environment that we are in all of the time, and that is the biggest way that we learn as people. And we learn the most from our parents. We model the most from our parents, okay? So according to 1 Corinthians 13:5, love is not easily provoked. It's not moody or crabby or harmfully sarcastic. Rather, it extends the same loving patience to our children that God grants us, demonstrating righteous anger only when appropriate, and then only for short periods of time. So that is another point, is I have the other verse written down. I don't always write down a bunch of verses, especially out of respect for our non-spiritual or Christian, however you want to word it, audience. But this is a faith-based study. This is a faith-based ministry. But I do want everybody to know that this is a place of no judgment. And this really, truly is a place right now where we are really focusing on teaching parents. It doesn't matter your background or your beliefs, on what love truly means in action, and how to set our hearts and warm our hearts open for these better connective relationships in our homes. So there is another verse here because I think it's really important. 1 Corinthians 13:5, I'm going to read it again. Love is not easily provoked, okay? That's the gist of it. So, and then demonstrate righteous anger only when appropriate and for short periods of time, okay? So when we are grumpy at home, we are displaying the opposite of what love is calling us to do. Our children will never be perfect, okay? We're never going to be perfect. We make mistakes. We have to be willing to give grace and quick to forgive our children, just as God forgives us, right? So why are we surprised if we're never perfect and we make mistakes as adults who have a brain that's mostly been developed? Our brains continue to develop over time. We've learned in studies, and the thing that I said about the brain learning from the environment, that is also things that we have learned. Now we have studies that show that our brains learn based upon the environment that we're in. They develop based upon the environment that we are in, right? So yes, it's partly genetic, but it's mostly environmental. Okay, so parental correction and discipline should never spring from uncontrolled anger or from us using our children as an easy target to release our own anger, okay? To release what's going on inside of us. That's why I was saying we need to walk away sometimes. Sometimes we need to walk away, not forever. I want to just keep relaying that point, is that we don't walk away forever. Walking away is a strength that we're able to do that, because it's not the easy thing to do. The easy thing to do is to let out that frustration, and we can let that out. We don't want to suppress those feelings. We don't want to become bitter. We can let that out by, maybe if you really need to let it out in that moment, walk away and go write it down somewhere, right? Or talk it through to yourself. Say, hey, why am I feeling this way? What is bringing up these feelings? What are they associated with? What could they be associated with from my childhood that's become a trigger now for me in my own child, right? And saying, how do I work through this in the future where I'm not acting out in my anger and I'm able to walk away? But it's really important that we come back and have the conversation that we need to have with our children, or we're missing that teachable moment that we really need to be giving them, right? Maybe it's a teachable moment in respect. Maybe it's a teachable moment in kindness, and them not being irritable, you know. But we also have to understand that children model our behavior. They model how we respond to situations, because they think that how we respond is the way that we should respond, and that's not always the case, whether we are their parents or not, or the adult or not. Sometimes we don't act like adults, right? We don't act mature, right? That is a hard pill to swallow sometimes for some. I am guilty of it. I can say almost everybody watching this channel is most likely guilty of it as well, where we can be immature adults and immature parents. But we need to be intentional parents. We need to be mature parents. We need to model good behavior to our children in order for them to behave the way they are supposed to behave. So if your kids always sense your unearned irritation, you will cause them to feel less loved and more insecure, okay? And they're not going to come out and say that to you. This is not even something they might be aware of right now. But I can tell you, this is something that I dealt with growing up. I did not feel loved. I did not feel accepted. I was very, very insecure. People were often irritated with me in my house. I could never do anything right. I could never make the right decisions. My irritation and moodiness and crankiness back, you know, was reprimanded, but nothing was ever said about that being put on me, or me modeling that behavior, you know, through the people that were in my home. And I'm not just saying my parents either. We all kind of just functioned that way most of the time. And maybe, you know, there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of reasons why we deal with that. And a lot of times it's a multi-generational thing. So our parents were treated that way and talked to that way when they were frustrated. So now when they get frustrated, they tend to do the same exact things, and there are these patterns that we create over generations and generations of time. It doesn't mean that that's the appropriate response. It doesn't mean that that's what creates healthy development in people and in our children. It means that we just keep doing the same exact things, because who do we learn best from? Our parents. We model their behavior. There are situations where people are like, I'm never, ever, ever going to do that in parenthood. And I'm just not going to ever do that to my kids. And they have worked through the traumas there, or they didn't experience many traumas. And trauma is not necessarily, it's not actually what happens to you. Yes, it can be traumatic, something that happens to you, but it's what happens inside of you in result to what happens to you, and that comes from psychologist and MD Dr. Gabor Mate, who is amazing and is a trauma expert and an addiction expert, and really works on spreading awareness of what trauma actually is and how it's so misconstrued, and how really to treat it, which is not the mainstream thing in today's society. So I'm just going to read this paragraph again because I want to read it in entirety. If your kids always sense your unearned irritation, you will cause them to feel less loved and more insecure. You will unintentionally push their hearts away from yours. This isn't intentional. It's not like you're thinking, this is what I want to do. I don't want my kids to be close to me. I don't want them to talk to me. I want them to feel unloved and insecure. We're never thinking that as parents, right? We want the best for our kids. So, and if this is the tendency, and if this tendency continues over time, they will likely adopt it in their own expression of choice later on to their own children. See, this is exactly what we talked about, thereby continuing a harmful pattern for generations to come. That is exactly what I was just explaining. It becomes a multi-generational issue, and we just think that it's okay because it's how everybody else has responded and acted, when we're really acting out of our own immaturity, and we're allowing our hearts and our feelings and our emotions to lead us instead of being in control of them, which is really where the strength lies. Okay, so determine to no longer let minor problems produce major reactions, and that is one of our key points too, is determine to no longer let minor problems produce major reactions. And then also, irritation causes our kids to feel less loved and more insecure, and it pushes their hearts away from ours. Okay, when we are constantly being irritated with them, life is more of a marathon than a sprint. Okay, so we need to resolve to exercise emotional self-control. And it's not something most of us, especially in my generation and the generations before mine, were taught. This is relatively a new phenomena. They are teaching this in schools. When I earned my early preschool, when I earned my early childhood degree, this is something that we had to really go into. Social development of children. We had to learn about how they develop socially, how they develop emotionally, social and emotional development in children, and how kids gain this sense of emotional autonomy, because because they have found that this is becoming such an important thing. They're starting to teach this in preschools, emotional regulation. Okay, they're not doing it across the board in every single school, I'm sure, but they are teaching these kids these skills that they need, because studies have found that this is so important. It is so important that kids are emotionally regulated, that they are able to express their emotions and learn how to control them, learn how to work through them, learn how to deal with them. If we're stuffing things down constantly and we're suppressing, what comes out? It's gonna come out. It's eventually gonna come out, and it's gonna come out in anger. It's gonna come out in frustration. It's gonna come out in irritation, okay? So when your 2-year-old has a tantrum because they're upset about something, well, sometimes as adults, we can have tantrums too, right? That's not appropriate. It's not appropriate to walk around having a tantrum all the time as an adult. But we get upset, right? We're allowed to be angry. We're allowed to get upset. We're allowed to feel those feelings, okay? And we're allowed to maturely express them. But our children, that's the only way they're able to express themselves, especially at 2. Most children are not fluently speaking at 2 years old, okay? That's not the norm. If your child is, they're a little advanced in their language development. That's how they express themselves. So allow them to have their feelings. You don't push them away. Well, I'm really sorry that you really wanted a snack before dinner, and I get that. And the answer is still no, and I love you, and you can give them a hug. You don't have to reprimand your 2-year-old for doing something that 2-year-olds developmentally do. This is a developmental response. It's healthy. A tantrum is healthy, okay? That's not the thing that we're taught in our families. We're taught that we have to shun that behavior. Well, if your children are being shunned every single time they're upset about something and said, hey, you're not allowed to have your feelings. You're not allowed to be angry. You're not allowed to be upset. What is that telling them? That our love is conditional. You only have the right to be around me and to feel loved by me when you're acting the way I think you need to be acting at all times. Okay? And our kids need to feel unconditionally loved. They do need to be able to express how they're feeling, and we need to teach them how to do that appropriately, okay? That's not saying, oh, hey, I'm angry, let me throw a phone out the window. I did that when I was a teenager. I was angry and I threw a phone out the window. But let me just tell you that I grew up in an environment when somebody was angry, they threw things. And they did things and they acted out in their anger, and I learned to do that, but I got in trouble for that. You know, so why is it okay for the adult in my life to behave that way, but it's not okay for me? That's how a child's mind works. Okay, my parent can act this way, but I'm getting grounded or I'm getting in trouble for doing the same exact things that they're modeling to me. Do we not see something wrong with this? And why? You get to be immature with your emotions because you're an adult? No. As adults, we need to set the stage for emotional maturity. If we don't know what that is, that's okay. Let's have a space where we give ourselves grace and we give ourselves forgiveness, and we say, okay, well, now that we learned these things, maybe it's a hard pill to swallow, but we need to learn what emotional autonomy is. We need to learn where this anger, where this bitterness, where all this stuff that's pouring out of us is stemming from. And I promise you, I just went on this journey for the past 3 years. It was the hardest journey of my life and also the best journey. Do I still get irritated? Do I still have things that I'm working through? Absolutely. But I've done the work, and it's been hard, and it's not been easy, but I've done it for my children. I've done it for my children because I want them to feel loved. I want them to feel accepted. I have a child with special needs, the same special needs that I had, the same behavioral issues that I had, and what was done for me was not helpful. I'm not saying my parents didn't do the best that they could. I believe that they did. I believe my parents did the best that they could. I believe that they loved me, but I didn't believe that when I was a child. I didn't believe that when I was going through it. I didn't believe that they had my best interest at heart. I didn't believe that so much, and I did not feel loved so much that I attempted to commit suicide. I cut myself. There were so many things in my life growing up that I do not want my child to feel, that I don't want him to grow up and do, because I'm creating the same environment and the same patterns that I grew up with that were not healthy. And that's hard to hear. But it's the truth. It's my truth. Okay? And I don't want that for my kids. I want my kids to have a better home environment. I want them to have a healthy, thriving environment where they learn emotional autonomy, where they can apologize for the things that they've done and reconcile a situation, okay? Instead of walking away and saying, nope, I'm not going to do that, which at 4, sometimes that's the response that I get, okay? But I do not want my child to feel alone. I do not want my child to feel like he can never come to me because I have created an environment where he doesn't feel safe or accepted or loved. And when we create an environment like that, and I'm not saying safe physically, there were times in my childhood I did not feel safe physically, but I'm talking more emotionally, or physically. It doesn't matter whether you feel safe physically or emotionally. But when we're not feeling safe emotionally, we don't always think about that. Our children need to feel safe emotionally, and they should have an environment at home where they can do that, okay? Where they can feel that way. I want them to come to me first. I want them to come to me over their peers, because I want to be the person influencing them, because I'm an adult. I don't want their peers influencing them. Peers influence us, and what happens? Well, when you're a teenager, you are more apt to make stupid decisions more than any other time in your life. That is your prefrontal cortex not being fully developed, and it's the stage of development that it is in. Even if you are a super good kid, you're almost guaranteed to make dumb decisions, some dumb decision, whether it's like super duper small or really, really big, okay? We are prone to make dumb decisions as teenagers because of the stage of development our prefrontal cortex is going through at the time, okay, in adolescence. So do I want an adolescent being the person that my child confides in all the time, and that is influencing their behavior? No, it doesn't mean that I don't love them. It doesn't mean, they're friends or whatever, but I don't want them to be the people that they're looking up to. They're not adults. I want them to be looking up to healthy adults, right? And we need to create healthy adults in our homes, okay? So life is a marathon and not a sprint. So you must pace yourself, and you must prioritize. Your relationship with God, your marriage, and your children must always remain top priorities, okay? And this means protecting your time with them and fighting to prevent anything from taking your love and devotion away from them and towards secondary things, okay? So irritation can also come from selfishness in our hearts, okay? Lust, bitterness, greed, and pride, they are never satisfied, okay? And we learned that in our marriage study yesterday, is that these things are never satisfied. We just keep feeding them, and they want more and more and more and more, and that's why they're not good for us. And they always cause relentlessness or restlessness and anger. But love inspires us to quit focusing on ourselves and to let go of these harmful and unnecessary motivations. Love ultimately lowers our stress and sets up our hearts to respond to our children with patience and encouragement rather than anger and exasperation. So run a mental checklist, and you might just discover a hidden reason why your irritation level is higher than it should be. We can bring that before God if we have that faith, right? Or we can, write down a list, okay, if that's not something that you want to do. If you don't have faith in God, or, that relationship, and you don't want that right now at this time, or, ever, write a list, okay? And we can, if we are bringing that before God, we can genuinely ask Him to forgive us and to help us through this. And when we truly turn to Him, acknowledging our faults, His strong and gentle spirit brings us peace and comfort and wisdom into our frustrating circumstances, and His word gives us insight so we can be more like Him and bring direction and life to those we love the most, okay? So our dare today is choose today to start reacting to your children with love, okay, instead of with irritation. And that means if sometimes we don't respond, it's like Thumper's mom and Bambi. If you don't have nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all. Well, that includes our tone. That includes how we respond to our children, okay? So begin by making a list of areas where you need to lower the stress in your life, and then list any wrong motivation that you need to release from your heart, okay? So we went over a lot today. That is it for our Love Dare for Parents Day 7. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in. If this is a hard pill for you to swallow, ask yourselves why, because anything that is hard for us to hear is often something that we need to work on within ourselves, and something that is affecting us. So do not forget to like and subscribe to my channel. I will see you tomorrow. I love you guys. Thank you so much, and God bless.